Working?
That looks great. Thanks, Heather.
Okay, great.
I think we are good to get started whenever you're good.
Okay. Um, well, welcome everybody. It's nice to see a pretty full house today. I'm really excited about this webinar. It's been months in the making. So we had the pleasure of meeting CD when we were in South Africa gosh, that was October, I guess. October or November, I get confused. But and we were with the Your Choice team and our one of our colleagues from DSW. So we had sort of this delegation that was going to both South Africa and Zambia to sort of landscape the opportunities for developing male contraceptives abroad and conducting clinical research. And this was a real opportunity for us to understand some research that had been done more qualitatively with young men. And I remember just sitting in this meeting and immediately slacking Zoe and Sabi and being like, we have to do a webinar. So, CD, I'm so glad that we're finally here. And what makes it even more special is that this is going to kick off a series. Dominic Shattuck and I go way back and to our days at FHI. And I think I remember when you graduated from your PhD program, Dom. So, that was just like a couple years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
So
we were little.
yes, we were just children. So it's nice to reconvene. And Dom actually has a history with MCI as well because he was on the I think the very first one of the very first board members at MCI, and then
That's right.
also has been a partner through his work at Johns Hopkins, and now is connecting us to the American Institute for Boys and Men. Um, so this is again a collaboration that we've really wanted to build on and grow. So Dominic's really taking the lead on bringing our organizations together, which I think is an exciting and potentially very powerful advocacy voice for the field. So today is a great convergence of those events, and I can think of no better topic under which to do it than to have CD showcase her research, which CD actually is a recent graduate. Has it been a year now since you finished your PhD?
Um, 2024. Yeah, it's a year and a
Okay.
few months.
I'm losing track. I guess it had been a year. So yeah. But I'm really excited for you to hear about her research. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Uh-oh, what did I just do? That did not do what I wanted to do. Can you guys still see the slides though?
Yeah, it still looks good.
Okay, so I'm going to give a brief intro on the global market landscape for male contraception, and then we'll move into a discussion of adolescent boys and sexual health. Dominic is going to um, speak for a minute as well, and then we're going to let CD get into her research. And sorry, Zoe, is Dominic's slide already integrated into here?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
And actually, Heather, I'll have you stop screen sharing when you get to CD spot and she'll do it for her portion.
perfect. Oh, okay, great. That makes sense. So without any further ado, I'll just run through really quickly. A lot of you on here have already heard the results of these data, but I think it's nice to use as a foundation for why we are reaching as far as we are. We really view a tremendous opportunity for the male contraceptive space as being parallel access, global access. You'll hear us use those terms a lot, but the they are used a lot in the female contraceptive product development space and other areas as well, of course. But for us as a sort of building community, we actually have the opportunity to build a global um, network of clinical research sites and manufacturing capabilities. A lot of the work that was done by USAID in the past was building this capacity in countries. So particularly South Africa has a very strong product development history. There's a lot of clinical research that's been done there in reproductive health, both in the, STI, HIV kind of space, MPT work. So there's a lot of capacity that we would want to continue to support and that is actually very rich for us in the male contraceptive space to tap into. So um, I think you guys are all familiar with the process for drug development, but this is a quick overview. When MCI first started, a lot of the work that we were funding was still really in this lead optimization and preclinical stage of things. In the subsequent 9 years, it's been amazing to see. Now we have 4 products, in addition to the Nesterone testosterone gel, that are in clinical trials. So we have the Atom vaso-occlusive product. We have YCT529. We have Next with their product Plan A. Next also has a new, well, I guess now I have to count 5. Next has a new product, NLS 133, that's also in clinical studies. And then we are welcoming a new grantee for us this year, PharmaYour, who also has a product in clinical studies. So that's 5. Just to level set, I should probably go back and mention again that MCI only funds non-hormonal reversible male contraception, but we do partner with folks working on the Nesterone testosterone trial because obviously they're the lead dogs in the race and they have done such amazing work that the rest of us have the privilege to learn from. So all this to say, we're really seeing momentum towards the field. So here is a more detailed overview by phase of where this is 32 targets that we really track the most closely at MCI. And shout out obviously to Logan, our chief research officer, who has raised these. It's funny to see this slide even grow over time. So, he's really built our investment and grant portfolio, as well as the RFAs that bring in the research and help shape it over his tenure. So this is really a really fun reflection to see. And in addition to the targets themselves, you'll see things are broken out in these colored, I hope you can see this okay, in these colored subunits here, so like sperm function, sperm transit. Those reflect really the mechanisms of action that we fund. So how we look at our funding portfolio, and we try to work across the different mechanisms of action, because obviously one product is not going to serve all needs. So we want things that will address a number of things. So here you'll see the clinical stage activities. I did not mention the 11 beta or the DMAO project. Those right now I don't believe are in active clinical research, but you'll see the other products here, as well as a shout out to the Geldom condom, which colleagues at Udemon in Australia have developed with a new hydrogel. So vibrant pipeline of products. So the question that really immediately comes up is there a market for this? One of the things that we've been sort of battling as MCI from the get-go is addressing myths and misperceptions. So the classic men aren't interested and women won't trust them. So we set out working with a great team of market researchers that were led by Steve Kretschmer and team. So they asked that question: will men want to use them and will women trust them? The answer is yes. So I think I can jump ahead here. Yeah. So this is the slide that it begs some time to really look into. So across these 7 countries, we were able to really see, the color coding, I think you can see here, tells the story. So everything in green covers a time period within 12 months. So about 2,000 men in each country were surveyed, and they were led through a discrete choice question process, or discrete choice process, I should say. So when they were answering these questions, it wasn't just this perfunctory, like, oh, if there's a male contraceptive on the market, would you use it? They had designed sort of an ideal contraceptive through that process, and then were asked if they would use it, and if they would, how soon after it hit the market. So we were really shocked to see like numbers in the 70s for Nigeria and Bangladesh and Vietnam, and then approaching that for Cote d'Ivoire and the Democratic Republic of Congo. So, and the other opportunity we had is in the United States, they fielded the survey first and pre-Dobbs decision. So we were able to go back and refield the survey after the Dobbs decision, which reversed Roe versus Wade. And you can see there's a significant jump here. So these data have become an absolute cornerstone of the work that we do to make the case for the need for more male contraceptives. That same survey in everywhere except the US, they were able to assess female partners as well, and to look at their trust. If their partner said they were taking a contraceptive, would you believe them? You guys can see this yourselves, but the level of trust was quite high in several of the countries. Most of them exceeded 50%. And I think what this also points out to us is that trust is great, but we should always be encouraging, if you don't trust your partner, you can continue using your own method. So I think a lot of times we get siloed. It happens to me too sometimes where I forget, like, no, this isn't either or, this is not zero sum. Like both partners can still contracept, which is not really that much of an option for men currently, other than condoms and vasectomy, as you all know. And then this is what leads us to the contraceptive layering conversation here. So the same group of men and women were asked, if they would continue to use a method. And in the cases of men, would they use a method if it were available, even if their partner was using a method? So this obviously is also great news because, this is just an extra layer of protection from unintended pregnancy. Again, the US was not included in this exercise because we were not able to assess the female partners for that study or for that arm. Okay. And I believe this is where I hand it over, Zoe.
Yes, that sounds great.
And Dominic, is this Dominic that will drive here? Do you want me to drive a little bit longer or?
BD is going to drive first, and then Dominic will wrap us up.
Okay, great. So I will stop sharing and stop rambling.
Okay, so let me share. Can you all see the screen?
Yep, looks beautiful, CD.
Cool. Mm, mm,
Perfect. Looks great.
Okay. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are connecting from. My name is Tidi. I am based at UCT in the School of Public Health in the Division of Social and Behavioral Sciences. And I am going to take you through a presentation today that draws from my broader PhD project. And the overall project positioned romantic relationships as key social context through which adolescent voices health attitudes, behaviors, vulnerabilities, and negotiations of masculinities are formed and enacted. And so in the project, rather than viewing boys as peripheral to sexual health, their lived experiences within romantic relationships were taken seriously, and I examined how this then shaped sexual health. So I just want to briefly share with you some of the methods that I used for the broader PhD project. The project was purely a qualitative study with adolescent boys aged 14 to 19 years from Gugulethu to Cape Town. And I accessed them through two local organizations that work broadly on health issues in the community of Gugulethu. I collected data between June 2021 and December 2022. And as part of the data collection tools, I use individual interviews. And here I did 28 of these, which were done via the traditional phone call or via a WhatsApp phone call. And I also did 8 focus group discussions with 4 to 7 boys in a group. And the third tool was a diary entry where I asked boys to keep a diary, and I would collect these every week and share either prompt questions for that week or follow-up questions for previous diaries. I then transcribed, translated, and loaded the data into NVivo for coding, and I used the thematic and discourse analysis to analyze the data. So just to share that my main claim in the broader PhD project is that the romantic relationship is a critical context that shapes sexual ideas and behavior. For this presentation, I want to show how the relationship context shaped boys' contraception decision-making. But before I do that, I just want to talk briefly about boys' perceptions of sex. So what happens often in public health is that sex and sexual health outcomes are framed outside of the context of romance, And such a framing is problematic because it reinforces the view that boys are violent, but also only interested in sex. And it also perpetuates the idea that the idea that if boys pursue romantic relationships, they do so because they use it as a gateway to sex. So the findings in my PhD study broadly, but also as you'll see here today, show that even though boys felt that being in a romantic relationship eventually leads to having sex, they were not in these relationships solely for sex. For example, Fana, an 18-year-old boy, shared in a diary entry saying that sex means something, but not everything to me. I could live without having sex, but it's a joyful feeling and I like it. Luando also challenges the idea that he is in a romantic relationship for sex, saying that for me, loving someone is not about having sex. I can't say that for her to prove that she loves me, she must have sex with me. No, love is love and sex is sex. So if adolescent boys were not in relationships solely for the purpose of having sex or using the relationship as a gateway to sex, why were they in these relationships? So I asked that question to the adolescent boys, and in response to that, Ada, a 17-year-old boy, said he's in a relationship to be happy, to love someone, and to be loved. If she loves me, then I will also love her. For Lishe, his reason for being in a relationship was, I wish for us to make this relationship work. Like I said, I love this girl, so I want us to work hard, buy a house, and have 2 children. For Zuelo, he said, I want to marry my girlfriend, so I can't do dirty, meaning cheat on her. So as you can see, together these narratives clearly reflect a strong desire for emotional connection, mutual affection, and a committed companionship. The statements by the boys and the boys generally in the study indicate future-oriented aspirations, including marriage, fidelity, family life, and suggesting basically that romantic relationships are viewed as a meaningful pathway towards stability and shared life goals rather than as short-term engagement. Okay, so now that I have provided a glimpse of boys' reasons and their reasons for being in romantic relationship, but also their perceptions of sex in this romantic relationship, in the next part of the presentation, I want to focus on how adolescent boys themselves understand and negotiate pregnancy. But before I do that, I just want to give a brief background on why the focus on adolescent boys and pregnancy prevention. Well, the reason is that adolescent unintended pregnancies, some of which are unwanted, so the rates of these are quite high, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, and with a significant consequences for educational trajectories and economic opportunities, as well as long-term well-being for both the adolescent boy and adolescent girl. And these consequences are mainly visibly or borne by girls, and they are also relational, affecting families, futures, and also the partners of adolescent girls. So despite pregnancy being a relational outcome, family planning policies and programs tend to place responsibility more overwhelmingly on girls and young women. And here, contraception is commonly framed as a female obligation, both in policy discourse, but also in frontline health service provision. So this means that boys and young men, when they are included at all, are often positioned narrowly, mainly as condom users, supporters, or facilitators, rather than as contraceptive decision makers in their own right. So as a result of all of this, adolescent boys' perspectives on contraception and pregnancy prevention are often marginalized or in some instances oversimplified. There is limited attention to how adolescent boys themselves understand responsibility, risk, care, and decision making within romantic relationships. So the problem with excluding adolescent boys is that it reinforces unequal gendered expectations and misses opportunities for more effective and equitable reproductive health outcomes. It is against this backdrop that the central question guiding the chapter I am presenting today centers on how adolescent boys understand and negotiate pregnancy prevention. By foregrounding boys' subjective experiences, the chapter aims to complicate dominant assumptions that boys are indifferent, that they are irresponsible, and that they are disengaged from pregnancy prevention. Okay, so in the rest of the presentation, I explore how boys describe responsibility, pregnancy risk, and contraception, and how these understandings are shaped by gender norms and structural constraints. So in terms of responsibility, I want to emphasize that adolescent boys in the study were not indifferent to pregnancy prevention. Instead, they consistently positioned pregnancy prevention as something that mattered deeply to them, and particularly in their romantic relationships. So across the interviews, focus group discussions, as well as the diaries, boys commonly described pregnancy prevention as a shared responsibility between them and their partners. For example, for some of the boys, pregnancy prevention was about making the right kind of future together. And speaking on this, Sipho said, "It is both our responsibility, and if she doesn't care, you just know that she doesn't care for you or your future." For some of the boys, pregnancy prevention was about being responsible partners. Speaking on this, Lechu said, "It is mostly my job to protect against pregnancy as a guy, because I have to make sure that when I ejaculate, I take it out. When I'm about to ejaculate, I just take it out if I'm not using a condom. Or if I'm using a condom, I make sure that I don't thrust roughly so that the condom will not break." And for some of the boys, pregnancy prevention was about being both a good and responsible partner, but also consideration of economic implications. Speaking on this, Wole said, "Yes, I do use a condom, even though the boys say sometimes you shouldn't use a condom. They say I must try having raw sex. I tell them that no, that is wrong. What if she falls pregnant? Now my parents have an extra burden to support." I think what is important here is that this shared responsibility was not framed purely in practical terms, but it was more of a moral and a relational issue. So responsibility was often tied to ideas of care, respect, commitment, particularly concerns for the future. And when these boys spoke about, a partner not caring about contraception, this was often interpreted as a lack of care for the relationship itself. So, Boyce's ideas of responsibility were also closely linked to strong anxieties about unintended pregnancy. They frequently spoke about the risks that pregnancy posed to schooling, employment prospects, and future aspirations for themselves, but also for their partners. In this sense, concern about pregnancy was not abstract, but it was rooted in very concrete fears about derailed life trajectories. For example, some of the boys raised concerns about the effectiveness of condoms. James, speaking on this, said, "I always worry that the condom might break, they are not 100% safe, and then she might get pregnant or get diseases. For other boys, pregnancy was perceived as a bad thing for the future, and Abonile said, I am also still at school and I'm not looking forward to having a kid. I also don't want to ruin her future. Sipho also perceived pregnancy as a bad thing for the future, saying that would be a disaster, meaning getting his girlfriend pregnant. We are not there yet. We are still young. So I think for me, what's important here is that concern on its own did not translate into resolving pregnancy risk, right? So notwithstanding these concerns that boys had, they faced structurally limited contraceptive opportunities of their own, which constrained their actual contraceptive practices. And as a result, most of them relied on condom or the withdrawal method, or even a combination of both. So the withdrawal method for a lot of the boys was often described as effective, and it was linked to a skill, discipline, but also control, and also the perceived effectiveness of withdrawal persisted throughout, even though from a biomedical perspective, it is a high-risk method. So Lihle, one of the boys who spoke about using the withdrawal method, said, I don't ejaculate inside her. I can feel when the sperms are coming, so I pull out. It does work because the sperm doesn't enter her, so she can't get pregnant. There's also 3 boys in a focus group discussion who speak about the effectiveness of the withdrawal method. Temba says you can feel when you're about to come. You have to be fast before they come out, and ask if the withdrawal method really works. Figile and Asapo said yes, it works, with Asapo further stating that, so I first ask if she's on the injection or not. If she says no, then I know how I'll manage my stuff. So these 2 quotes on the screen show that young men understand pregnancy prevention as something that they can personally manage through bodily awareness and control rather than through consistent contraceptive methods. So withdrawal here is not seen as risky or an inferior method, but more of something that one has to be skilled in, but also that requires being responsible. And also it is perceived as a validated practice, especially when female contraception is absent. So despite the lack of effectiveness of the withdrawal method, it is, boys did not see it as a wrong choice for themselves, but rather more of a method through which they can enact responsibility and masculine self-regulation. So despite a lot of the boys relying on the method, some of them did not, or some of them had started questioning. They spoke about, for example, Ada said, no, I don't do that. I actually stopped when my friend got a girl pregnant. That scared me. So I stopped, and now all I use is a condom. So Ada's quote shows that the trust in the withdrawal method is not as universal, and depending on social proximity, then there might be issues around the use of the method, but also showing that masculine self-control is fragile and cannot always be guaranteed. I also want to talk about boys' perspectives of hormonal or biomedical contraception, right? The findings from the project show that the boys' views of biomedical or hormonal contraception were far more ambivalent. Some of the boys actively supported their partners' use of contraceptives and even accompanied them to the clinic. For example, Sipo says, I asked her to start using contraceptives and then accompanied her to the clinic for the first time to get an injection. So Sipo's quotation here illustrates that some of the boys see involvement as care and partnership, but also this happens within a system where contraceptive burden remains feminized. So boys may only have the option to support their partner's uptake of contraceptives rather than having an option for themselves. And even in instances where support for a female partner's use of contraceptives there was that uncertainty or anxiety around the side effects, and mainly these were shaped by community myths and limited access to reliable information. For example, B shared that he feared the side effects, hence he did not ask his girlfriend to start using contraceptives. He said, I did not ask my girlfriend to use contraceptives. I'm scared to tell her. Maybe she doesn't like using them. Some people say they are not good and that you get fat, and sometimes you can even have too much water in your body. So the quote by B exposes some of the hesitation that boys have in terms of intervening in their partner's use of contraceptions instead of, forcing them or them having that decision-making power over their partner's bodies. So in addition to some of these fears that boys had about what contraceptives would do to their female partners' bodies, they also shared their fears around what hormonal or biomedical contraceptives would do to their own bodies. For example, Ngozi said that, yes, I would take them, meaning hormonal or medical contraceptives, but not all the time. If my sex drive decreases, then I would take it occasionally, right? And in the case of boys like Ngozi, anxiety is more about, the masculine consequences of what the contraceptives will do to their bodies. So all of these concerns and fears resulted in some form of hesitation, not necessarily opposition, but more of uncertainty about the use of hormonal or biomedical contraceptives. And I think also they show that boys, the ambivalence occurs within a context where responsibility still defaults to girls, and again reinforcing structural inequality even when these boys are caring and supportive. So they express some mixed emotions because their role was inherently limited, and they were left with not much of a choice but to negotiate pregnancy prevention without embodied contraceptive technologies of their own. Okay, so in conclusion, I'd like to just share that so the study argues for a shift in seeing adolescent boys as peripheral to pregnancy prevention, to recognizing them as relational actors whose involvement is shaped and can help transform gendered reproductive health systems. It challenges the dominant assumption that adolescent boys are indifferent or disengaged from pregnancy prevention. And it shows that boys consistently express worry about the social, educational, and financial implications of pregnancy, both for themselves but also for their partners. So these concerns were often framed relationally and reflecting care for their partner's futures as well as their own. But these concerns did not also automatically translate to equitable practices in contraceptive use or pregnancy prevention. So it is therefore important to pay attention to how we conceptualize boys' roles, as this directly shapes the kinds of reproductive health programs that are imagined or can be imagined as possible. However, currently, family planning programs miss a critical opportunity by positioning boys primarily as supporters of female contraception rather than as active contraceptive users and decision makers in their own right. So, by failing to engage boys directly, programs risk reinforcing the same gender inequities that they aim to address. Um, Involving boys meaningfully in family planning education has the potential to challenge misinformation and expand contraceptive responsibility beyond girls, but also promote more equitable relationships. Engaging boys, not just as partners, but as participants, is essential for improving reproductive health outcomes and also advancing gender equity. Thank you.
Thanks, CD. Would you stay on and continue to drive the slides, please? Because yeah, just slide. You must have my slide after this. If you go two more slides. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right here. Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we are yeah, this was a great presentation. It was great to hear the voices of the boys, hearing about, how they see themselves as partners, as contraceptive users, and kind of there was one point that kind of really stood out for me where I think his name was Wole, who was talking about not just this would impact my life, but even my parents would then have another mouth to feed or another person to take responsibility for, and showing us that these young men are thinking about themselves within the world and within their relationships with other people. And you had several really important findings here that, you noted that the boys were already seeing pregnancy prevention as a shared responsibility. And this isn't a gap, right? So this is actually the opposite of the gap we talk about so often. The gap is really, as you mentioned, in their preparation. So the boys are navigating this space with incomplete and sometimes inaccurate information. So they're managing this limited information about withdrawal. They're having concerns about condoms and navigating concerns about their partner's management of hormonal contraceptives, right? That's a conversation a lot of guys never have. Many men don't know the side effects until they're much older in life, that the women have to navigate these different challenges with contraceptive methods, hormonal contraceptive methods. So at the same time, we know there's been some research around how policy and programs have not brought men and boys into these activities very effectively. And I'll call right up to the Global Action on Men's Health, Sexual and Reproductive Health Policy. I'll drop the link in the chat afterward that shows that our policies and programs largely exclude men and boys. And what this review found was that only a small fraction of the regional policies actually operationalize men's role in reproductive health. So as this goes like far beyond contraception, this is talking about things also related to like erectile dysfunction, male genital cancers, and even men's education in sexual and reproductive health. So when we take this kind of higher level context of the field, we can see that we've created a system that expects responsibility without kind of providing the appropriate tools or the foundation for that responsibility. And some of these young people, maybe it's through technology, maybe they're more open to conversation. We're not really sure where they get this knowledge. Maybe that you can talk a little bit more about that afterward too, CD. But like, where does this information come from around reproductive health? And are they just kind of winging it? Are they just going to YouTube or Google or something like this to find out? And it matters because as new male contraceptive methods come online, the idea of uptake of those methods, it won't just center on like the functionality of the product, right? So is it effective or not effective? That's important. But really, what we'll really have to answer is questions around whether boys and men in their readiness to use the methods. Are they ready to use those methods? Do they have the right mindset? Do they see this as important? Do they see it as valuable? So now we build on that infrastructure around boys, and how we do that is we ensure they have accurate information. I mean, we've been saying this for years around contraceptive use for women, but the boys need this active information about their own reproductive health. We need to promote this caring decision making. These were very open young men who spoke with you and shared very, very sensitive information with you about their relationships and how they saw their partners and where they see themselves, and kind of promoting that and working around other relationships that also can feed into their romantic relationships. So promoting that caring decision making, and then help them get ready to make decisions about potential male contraceptives that may come and be available down the road, or how do they help their partner get to the clinic? How do they show up for their partner, not just on the day of going to the doctor's office, but later on when maybe they're managing side effects or things like this. So this includes early reproductive health education, building their relationship skills, and treating boys as caring decision makers and not as bystanders. Yeah, I only have one slide this morning, so yeah, I think we can kind of try to get to some conversation and some questions as soon as possible. Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks so much, CD, and thanks, Dominic. We do have one question already in the chat, so we can start there. I think it's for you, CD. Jason is asking if in your studies you heard any stories about reproductive fraud by females on males about being on protection or inability to get pregnant in order to get pregnant on purpose, and if you have any thoughts on that.
Can you repeat the question, Zoe?
Yeah. And it's also in the chat if you want to reference it there. But if you heard any stories about reproductive fraud by females on males about being on protection or about having an inability to get pregnant in order to get pregnant on purpose, and if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, so there were quite a few of the adolescent boys in my project that I spoke to who had shared that they always use condoms because they do not trust their partners, because it's happened in the past that a partner would say they are on contraceptives, whereas they are not. So, in order for themselves to take on that responsibility of making sure that the pregnancy doesn't happen, then the only available option was to consistently use condoms. So, yeah.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks, CD. Any other questions or discussion points?
I had written a couple down actually. So, as we think about these new male contraceptive methods, your work raises questions about whether they're prepared. What other things might influence their willingness or hesitation even to use those methods as they become more available, or as they become available? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing was the side effects. Obviously, having had that from the experiences of female contraceptives, right? So I think that the hesitation might be there, but I also don't think that really came up a lot, which is something that I'm really looking forward to looking into in terms of if there were to be male contraceptives, um, what would these boys' perceptions of that be? But also if they would be willing to use them, and if there are any hesitations, um, what would they be? So that's definitely something that I'm actively thinking about, and hopefully we can have another webinar
Yeah.
presenting those results.
Yeah. Can you exit out of like host mode and then we can have bigger images on for everybody? CD. Thanks. Great.
Mhm.
I see your hand, Logan, but I'm going to go. I think Tatiana was before you in the chat, so I'll go that and then to Logan. So Tatiana asks about intersectionality in your study, CD, and how social categories could change their perception of sexual and reproductive health. I don't know if you have any thoughts or work around that.
So I would like to emphasis at hand results on intersectionality. I think the simple and straightforward answer to that is no, there's not. And yeah, I guess that's another interesting topic to consider and explore further. But I think also because I focused mainly on heterosexual romantic relationships, hence there's not any. So yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Logan?
Yeah, appreciate it. And thanks, CD. I really appreciate those like nuanced insights from people and right hearing their specific words because um, I think those experiences resonate with a lot of men. I think a lot of men have fear of unintended pregnancy and they want to have this charted life path and the reproduction piece of it is a piece of it, but like they want to know how that's going to go. They don't want to have surprises. And I think that that's something that not a lot of people recognize is that like men have their own motivations to avoid unintended pregnancy. And so seeing that written down is, of course, very validating. But also just seeing that you have these people that want to engage in reproductive health. Maybe it's to help their partner, maybe it's for their own protection, right? There's a whole bunch of different motivations, but they all kind of come at this idea with like, I don't quite know how I can get involved here. I don't know quite what I can do. And so I automatically, obviously, think of male contraceptives as the tool to engage these people and bring them on board. But just to say, I really also appreciated the comment that like advocacy is going to be necessary when these things actually start moving forward, right? People are going to have to be educated on their own bodies and their capability as reproductive beings for when these come to market. So just a comment. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for that, Logan.
Yeah, thanks, Logan. We have another comment in the chat or question that I think is a little bit similar to the last one, but asking if there are cultural or social factors that influence men's use of contraception. I don't know if you picked out anything from some of those quotes, CD.
So asking about cultural and social factors.
Yes.
So I think what was interesting for me with the population or the sample of adolescent boys that I worked with was that they lived in Guguletu, and which is more of an urban township, right? But also a lot of them bear their roots from the rural Eastern Cape. So there was a combination of that, right? So in some of the discussion, you could clearly link how perceptions that or norms from back in the rural Eastern Cape kind of informed how they saw some of the things, if I say, that they were doing in their relationship. So I thought that was interesting, and obviously the idea of being a man, right? In a different chapter, I explore that in depth in terms of these are young men who come from a culture where being a man is taken as a very serious thing, and one has to go through a rite of passage in order to be a man. And if you have not, then there are social repercussions for that, right? So it was interesting to see how they also linked sex with that kind of stepping stone into being a man before they can actually go through the ulwaluko, which is the actual rite of passage. But I also found it interesting that they did not use fatherhood as a kind of like a marker of being a real man, and masculine norms around making a girl pregnant and what that means for one social status. So I think for me that's one of the things that stuck. So of all the boys that I interacted with, none of them had a child. And I think I shared one quote with whom the friend had impregnated someone, but also follow up and trying to get him to take part in the study did not work. But yeah, I think those are some of the social and cultural issues. Understanding that it's expensive to raise children from maybe, I would say, the urban context where they're in. Everything requires money, but also kind of challenging the idea that as much as culturally being a man is about being able to make someone pregnant, that's not so much the case for us. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. We've got a whole bunch of ones in the chat. We have a comment saying great research, and hoping that they can conduct similar research in other contexts because of how many insights into adolescent boys' perceptions and intentions on contraception. And also that they really appreciated the framing around romance and love. So great job there, CD. We have some questions coming in specifically about the study itself. So the first question there is, what approaches did you use to facilitate these conversations? Did you have any sort of structured approach in that format?
Mm. So that's an interesting one because looking back, I think often we do want to get this kind of information, but it's some of the ways that we do it, right? Hence, I took the relational approach because a lot of our conversations started about, dating and falling in love being more of a common thing that happens to adolescents and what that means for them. And I think for me, I wanted to kind of start the conversations from kind of a human perspective, if I may say, to say that these are natural things that happen and what happens in them once people are in these romantic relationships, as opposed to coming from a position of thinking about these boys as problematic, as people who don't want to use condoms, who have all the decision-making power. So we kind of eased into the conversation. So yeah, I guess that's one approach that I think worked. So.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I'm gonna jump around just for the sake of time, but one other question there is, what recommendations do you have for engaging the greater population of boys, of adolescent boys?
Mm. So I think there's a few things that could happen, right? I think generally when we talk about pregnancy, when we talk about HIV, we talk about them outside of romance. And I think that then becomes problematic because then we are moving away from the whole relational kind of lens that makes this thing possible. Not to say that people are not having sex outside of relationships. I mean, some of the boys spoke about that. But I think it's important to understand how that looks like in the context of romance. So in my whole PhD project, if I'll try to remember, but one of the recommendations I make is that we need to take the relationship context into consideration when we're talking about these things, and that we need to truly engage adolescent boys. So if you go to Google Earth right now, there's a lot of mobile clinics, tents that are catered or cater for young women and adolescent girls, but not so much for these young boys. So when we spoke about that, they said they don't really have anyone to talk to about that, and that the information that they got from school, which they got from the life orientation sessions, was not sufficient because some of the questions that they would ask were deemed as offensive. And I think there's a whole literature around teachers being somewhat uncomfortable around delivering sexually comprehensive sexual education. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. There's a bunch more questions in the chat. I did message people independently, but I will be downloading the questions and we can help coordinate any answers following the webinar. So if I don't get to your question right now, that's not to say that we won't get back to you. But the question I think is a really good one to end on is from Chris. It says, since the expression of male fear and care can be taboo, did you see big differences between the focus groups and the journal entries?
So one of the reasons I did the journals was for that, really, so they would be able to really pour out their thoughts on paper. But I found that a lot of them were actually comfortable discussing about some of these issues in the group discussions as well. So we spoke a lot about, the kind of emotional vulnerability of adolescent boys and maybe men in general, and what that looks like, but also what that means for them. And I would say there was a mixture in terms of the responses, right? From recognizing that men are also humans and that they should be able to, show emotions, but also doing so in a manner that does not lead to one being a um, a social spectacle, right? Wherein you'll be mocked for having, say, for example, cried in front of your partner. And I think a lot of them were okay with being vulnerable and emotional among themselves, but not so much when it comes to their partners, because the idea was that then they would tell other people, and there were concerns about how, there were the concerns about the repercussions of that.
Yeah, thanks for that, CD. Awesome. I know we are right at time today, so I do apologize for people who we haven't gotten to the questions of. Like I said, feel free to drop them in the chat or email them to me after. I can drop my email in the chat and we'll work together to get you an answer. Thank you all for joining today. Really appreciate it, and really, really appreciate. Want to give a big round of applause to CD and to Dominic and to Heather for their presentation today, and also to Terry for his wonderful artwork, which we will also share after this call. We really appreciate having everyone on, and we think this was a great conversation. If you did register for the webinar today, you will be getting a recording that way too, so you'll also have my email there. But thank you all for joining, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.